Starting us right at number 10, we have the Devil's Hour. I think it's best to start this video by telling you how this hour became an urban legend in the first place. In folklore, 3 a.m. is considered the Devil's Hour to many, but also goes by the name of the witching hour. In Catholic origins, this time was significant because it was the opposite hour to the death of Christ. The Bible says that Jesus was placed on the cross at 9 a.m., then darkness covered the land from noon until his death at 3 p.m., where Jesus cried out, quote, "It is finished." So that's why it's significant, because the time is flipped to mock Jesus, just like how an upside down cross does the same thing. Then around the 1500s, the Catholic Church prohibited any sort of activities during 3 to 4 a.m. because of the prevalence of witches and demonic accounts at that time. 3 is also regarded as the holy number because it resembles the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So using 3 a.m. is another way to mock Christianity. At number 9, we have the legend of La Mala Hora. This one originates from New Mexico. La Mala Hora directly translates to the evil hour. La Mala Hora is an evil and wicked spirit that haunts people who happen to be walking alone in the dead of night, specifically around 3 a.m. La Mala Hora first appears as a large black lump, constantly moving and changing shape. At other times, it transforms into a wicked woman wearing black clothing, hair long, and appears to be floating around since her feet does not touch the ground. It's said if you encounter her at 3 a.m., you will have yourself a bad omen. This bad omen means that you or something you know will pass away. It's believed that this legend was used to warn anyone before walking alone at night. So I guess if you're in New Mexico, you will not catch anyone alone at this time. Coming at number 8, we have the Amityville Horror. This real life case was famous, so you may know this one. But for all of you in the unknown, this is a very tragic homicide case. On November 13, 1974 at 3 a.m., Ronald Defoe Jr. shot and murdered 6 members of his family. Afterwards, he would go to a local bar and yell, quote, "Help, I think my mother and father were shot." He was convicted of second-degree murder, but the odd thing is that he reported hearing voices in his head telling him to do so. It was 3 a.m., so the voices may have been demons tempting him, especially as previously mentioned, 3 a.m. is the hour of the devil, so this may have been a reason for him to do this. He also told police, quote, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." Coming at number 7, we have demonic entities taunt the number 3. The number 3 has been used in Christian theology as a way to express the opposing relationship between God and the devil. I mean, the significance of 3 is referenced in the Bible many times. God tends to say things 3 times. Jesus rising from the dead in 3 days. Jesus presented with 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And of course, the Holy Trinity. As mentioned before, 3 a.m. is exactly 12 hours after Jesus' departure, so it's basically the opposite time of his death, which was a good way for demons to mock God. People also report paranormal occurrences in sets of 3, from 3 scratches on their skins to 3 knocks on their home doors. The belief is that evil spirits challenge the power of the Holy Trinity by striking fear in its own followers. Coming at number 6, we have the veil between life and death is thinnest. The veil of life and death is basically the midpoint where our soul transcends into the afterlife. This is how Judaism and Christianity look at it. They think that they are just 2 sides of the same world. Doesn't that mean that dead people are in the same world? Well, not exactly. They say that the veil gets to its thinnest point at around 3 a.m. The thin veil basically means that the accessibility between life and death is greater. The spirits of the deceased have the opportunity to pop back into the world of the living, which is the explanation for many of these ghosts and demonic stories. Right in the hump of our list, we have sleep insomnia. A lot of people believe they are being haunted or possessed because they consistently wake up at 3 a.m. or the devil's hour. But it really might just be due to your altering levels of melatonin in your body. This could be caused from lighter sleep cycles, stress, or underlying health conditions. If this happens once or twice, you should probably be fine. But if it's consistent, then you probably have sleep insomnia. It is also linked to depression in adults, and 3 a.m. is the usual time of REM sleep, which is why waking up at this time might leave you feeling in a state of confusion and in a sense of doom, adding to the 3 a.m.'s mystery and fear. Oh, also stay away from the coffees and energy drinks before you sleep, because this will also cause you to wake up around this time. And maybe next time you wake up at 3 a.m., you won't immediately think you are possessed, but maybe you'll think you have a little insomnia next time. Coming at number 4, we have the 3 a.m. viral trend. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, somebody made a viral internet trend on the devil's hour. With every scary phenomenon comes a herd of people trying to test or challenge themselves whether or not they encounter anything or even believe it. For this challenge, people began recording videos around 3 a.m. to capture the supernatural. This challenge lost many of its legitimacy because many would play pranks to scare others and others would fake it all in general. But some did capture some creepy, unexplained videos though. All the way at number 3, we have practice of witchcraft. As previously mentioned, the Catholic Church prohibited activities during 3 to 4 a.m. This is the time when witches were actually believed to be real and malevolent creatures. Witches caused widespread panic and suspicion all over, with many accusing others of being witches when they haven't done anything wrong. This is equivalent to not liking someone and just calling them a witch. It is also believed that witches perform their rituals and spells around 3 a.m. or the witching hour because this is where their powers get stronger. Witches were so feared during the 1600s to 1800s that over 60,000 people were put to death due to witch accusations. Reason being is because of the Old Testament, which states, "Thou shalt not permit a sorceress to live." Coming in number 2, we have Ray Bradbury's novel. Ray Bradbury's 1962 novel named Something Wicked This Way Comes tells the tale of a mysterious carnival leader named Mr. Dark. This leader was a malevolent being and would often feed off the lies he enslaved. In the novel, there's a reference to 3 a.m. Doctors say that the body is at a low tide, the soul is out, the blood moves slow, and you're the closest to death. Basically, this means that sleep is a patch of death, but being awake at 3 a.m. wide-eyed staring is living death. The novel also states that more people die in hospitals at 3 a.m. than any other time, which made people only worry more about this number. Coming in at number 1 spot, we have the 8-hour sleep myth. Historian Robert Urkich had a very different explanation for the devil's hour that had a bit more solid scientific evidence to prove his legitimacy. He studied human sleep patterns for over 16 years and found that an 8-hour sleep is only but a modern trend since our distant and early ancestors would sleep at 2 different times in the day. Basically, humans in the past would sleep 2 hours after dusk, then awake for 1 or 2 hours before falling back to sleep again. No, we didn't wake up because of supernatural causes, but instead people would get up and be active during the 2 hours, doing things such as praying, writing, making food, socializing, and even intercourse, in which doctors claimed it was the best time to conceive, which is after a restful first sleep. I guess this is an urban legend that gives some peace of mind to people consistently waking up at 3 a.m.
Starting off at number 10, Alistair. Alistair is a high-ranking archdemon and the chief executioner to the monarch of hell. One of his nicknames is evil genius of the household, meaning that Alistair is the demon that conducts the most heinous, depraved, and unbearable cruel tortures in the pits of hell. Alistair is linked to Nemesis and the destroying angel and is now known as the executioner. Alistair's origins are mostly unknown, though it is implied that he was once a destroyer angel that was cast into the pit for his heinous deeds. Alistair would see torture as an art and a privilege, and that sinners should experience pain in the same manner as their own sins are being committed. Coming in at number 9, Lilith. Lilith is a female demonic figure of Jewish folklore. Her name and personality are thought to be derived from the class of Mesopotamian demons called Lilu, and the name is usually translated as night monster. A cult associated with Lilith survived among some Jewish people as late as the 7th century. The evil she threatened, especially against children and women in childbirth, was said to be counteracted by the wearing of an amulet bearing the names of certain angels. In rabbinic literature, Lilith is variously depicted as the mother of Adam's demonic offspring, following his separation from Eve, or as his first wife, whereas Eve was created from Adam's rib. Some accounts hold that Lilith was the woman implied in Genesis and was made from the same soil as Adam, basically refusing to be obedient to her husband. Lilith left Adam and the perfection of the Garden of Eden. 3 angels tried to force her to return, but she wouldn't. According to some mythologies, her demonic offspring were sired by an archangel named Samuel, and were not Adam's children. Lilith basically takes children at night, hence the name Night Monster. Now at number 8, Demogorgon. Yes, like in Stranger Things, but it doesn't look the same. A Demogorgon is a demon associated with the underworld, although often ascribed to Greek mythology. The demon stands at a full 18 feet in height, 2 baboon heads with blue and red faces with green scaly skin. Demogorgon preferred to avoid direct conflict, instead using magic to help his servants. Demogorgon could hypnotize with a gaze or drive creatures around him to terror and insanity just at the sight of him. His whip-like tail had the ability to drain the life energy out of a living thing. Here at number 7, Leviathan. You know, like the ride at Canada's Wonderland? No? No one? Yeah, no one cares about Canada. I'll move on. Leviathan is the beast of darkness and chaos and a king of hell referred to in the Bible. He makes a major appearance in the book of Job as one of God's first and mightiest earthly creatures that rules the seas in contrast to Behemoth, Canada's Wonderland ride, who rules the earth, and Ziz, who rules the skies. Leviathan is one of the 7 princes of hell and its gatekeeper. Leviathan, as the gatekeeper, is known as the Hellmouth, where the mighty demon's mouth is said to represent the gates of hell itself. He is also the representation of the sin envy. The entrance of hell is envisioned as Leviathan's mouth due to the fact that when a whale is hungry, he opens his mouth and a sweet smell comes out. The fish are tricked by the smell and then they enter his mouth. Suddenly, the whale's jaw closes. Leviathan and the gates of hell are linked to one another. As such, it is said that the demon's very mouth, known as Hellmouth, can lead to the depths of the abyss as well. Taking number 6, Lucifer. Lucifer, light bearer in Latin, or in classic mythology, the morning star. Like the planet Venus at dawn. Seen as a male holding a torch, Lucifer had almost no legend, but in poetry he was often herald of the dawn. In Christian times, Lucifer came to be regarded as the name of Satan before his fall. It was thus used by John Milton, who was around from 1608 to 1674 in Paradise Lost. And the idea underlies the phrase, as proud as Lucifer. I fell from grace trying to prove a point. I was banished for eternity in the lowest pits of the abyss, for trying to show my brethren and my beloved Father on how flawed and murderous you humans are. And in the end, what do? They shun me. They spit on me and exile me, while you freely pollute and slaughter the planet he put you on. You don't deserve to live. Many Christians actually believe the word devil was once a beautiful angel named Lucifer. Moving on to number 5, Bloody Mary. According to legend, Bloody Mary is the ghost of an unhappy woman who either took her own life because her baby was stolen or because she was accused of hurting her children. Depending on the variation used, this turned her spirit mad with grief or anger. She would haunt the world with the use of mirrors, kinda like Candyman. Known in life as Maryworth, it was traditionally said that Bloody Mary will appear if a brave, or stupid, soul chants her name 3 or more times next to the mirror in complete darkness at midnight. According to the variations of the legend, one is also said to be able to make the ghost appear by saying, "Bloody Mary, I'm looking for your baby," or "I believe in Maryworth." Of course, anyone stupid enough to provoke Bloody Mary is said to pay the price. Unlike many ghosts who usually just scare humans, Bloody Mary is said to be capable of physical harm or will end the life of her victims using disfigurement. Number 4, Akamana. Akamana is the 3rd of 9 and the demon of wicked mind, making people think that he is the 3rd demon born out of the 9 who are the sons of Satan, born out of the darkness to corrupt all those he possesses. However, he cannot survive in the normal world due to the life force of whoever he is possessing being too thin. Akamana is described at times as being a true son of the devil, due to being regarded as the most violent demon to ever be born and roam the depths of hell. Cruel and controlling, obsessed with power and destruction. Akamana is a hateful but self-loving being who wishes only harm upon those other than him. Coming in at number 3, Zozo. The Zozo demon is a mysterious trickster entity known for stalking people through Ouija boards. Those who claim they've made contact with Zozo say he often shows himself by guiding the planchette in a figure 8 formation before frantically zooming back and forth between the Z and O. His interactions start out friendly but grow malicious. He's known for cursing at and threatening people that try to make contact. Some believe that saying his name out loud can also summon Zozo from the depths of hell. Zozo believers claim the demon has ancient origins from Africa. Taking spot number 2, Dybbuk. In Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk is a spirit of a dead person that attaches itself to a person on earth. The word Dybbuk is derived from a Hebrew term meaning attachment. According to tradition, a soul that has not been able to fulfill its function in its lifetime is sometimes given another opportunity to do so in the form of a Dybbuk. Dybbuks seek out people who face similar challenges or circumstances to themselves and attach themselves to their bodies. Dybbuks are said to have escaped from Gehenna, the Jewish purgatory, or even have been turned away from Gehenna for transgressions too serious for the soul to be allowed entrance, like taking your own life. An evil Dybbuk often leaves only after being satisfied or exorcised. Number 1, Slenderman. Slenderman was first mentioned in Something Awful forums, create paranormal images. He generally appears in modern times as a tall humanoid creature in a black or gray suit, with a red or black tie and a white shirt. His face is totally white with no facial features at all. He has no hair and long fingers, and is more bonier than a typical human. Slender Man has been depicted in imagery and literature between 6 and 15 feet tall. Because of his inexact nature and differences between accounts, no one has determined what exactly the Slender Man is. Currently, there are two leading stories as to what the Slender Man could be: the Tupolev effect and the quantum theory. He behaves in what might be seen as a passive-aggressive manner, often stalking targets for years at a time before even attacking. It's understood that he tends to torture his targets mentally over long periods of time, using fear and paranoia driving them to insanity. No one has ever explained the reasoning behind his tactics or the way he chooses his victims, but he is rarely, if ever, portrayed in a good way.
Coming in at number 10, we have the No-Face Charlie. If you grew up in the 1950s or in the 60s in western Pennsylvania, chances are you've heard of the legend of the Green Man or No-Face Charlie. The legend says that No-Face Charlie would stalk the remote streets at night and sometimes would chase others away from him. No disrespect, but if I saw him at night, I would definitely be running the other way. No-Face Charlie was actually based on a real man named Raymond Robinson. His story is pretty tragic, so listen up. In 1919, Robinson was only 8 years old when he was reaching for a bird's nest at the top of an electrical pole when he was suddenly struck by 11,000 volts of electricity. He was severely injured. His nose, his lips, ears, and eyes were all gone or misshapen. And on top of that, one of his hands were completely blown off. This is what gave him this image that appears haunting for others. Raymond was in fact a really kind and friendly individual, but others feared him and would give him this negative stigma regardless of how he really is on the inside. He has now since passed away, and I hope he is finally accepted.
Number 9, werewolves. You might think of werewolf stories as something only told for fun around the campfire, but that hasn't always been the case. People truly believed in the existence of these creatures. In fact, in the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe, werewolf trials accompanied witch trials. It's even more surprising to note that the amount of people who confessed to being werewolves. Some were likely tortured into confession, but others believed that they were real werewolves. The idea that a human could transform into an animal was quite popular, and people thought that they could make a deal with the devil in order to gain that power. In the 1500s, a French tailor was convicted in luring in, torturing, and slaying his victims before cooking and having them for dinner. He was also accused of turning into a werewolf to terrorize the town at night. Although there was no exact victim count, he was believed to have taken dozens of lives. The tailor made no attempt to defend himself. Instead, he cursed until his last breath when he was burned at the stake. The court was apparently so shocked by his evil acts that the court burned the documents too.
You missed me, because at our number 8 spot we have Candyman. This is a cautionary tale for kids not to dig right into their Halloween candy. He is the sole reason why we have to take extra precaution before eating anything. The legend differs depending on who you ask. In one legend, it's said that if you say his name 5 times, he will appear behind you and take your life with his hook. In another legend, he poisons and puts other hazardous items inside of children's candies. The truth of this urban legend is revealed in many different stories, so the narrative changes. They say that many years ago, Candyman was a black slave named Daniel Robitaille. He was a talented painter and decided to paint a picture for the plantation owner's daughter, in whom he fell madly in love with. When the owner found out, he brought all of his racist friends to hunt him down. They would eventually get to him and cut off his hand, which explains his hook for a hand. In another iteration, Candyman was a man named Ronald Clark O'Brien. This man was convicted of killing his 8-year-old son with potassium cyanide laced pixie sticks, all because he wanted some insurance money. What a joke. On his execution day, people even chanted "trick or treat" outside of the room he died in.
Now at number 7, Cropsey.
For years, kids living and around Staten Island raised goosebumps with the tale of Cropsey, a boogeyman who lived in the woods and made a nighttime routine of hurting children. Parents would ease their kids' fears by telling them it wasn't real and it was just a myth. I always heard of the boogeyman growing up and it always terrified me, but thank God he's not real.
But he was.
What?
Yeah. In 1987, Andre Rand was put on trial and convicted for child abduction. It turned out he may have been connected to a bunch of children's disappearances in the 1970s. Andre had once worked at Willowbrook, which was a mental institution. He denies he had any involvement in other cases, but it's clear his activities had a heavy influence on the stories that followed.
At our 6th spot, we have Snake in a toilet bowl. A fear of snakes is among the oldest of all humankind's basic fears, so this urban legend is almost based on our own instincts. Have you ever seen those videos or those movies that show a person doing their business on the toilet when all of a sudden they get attacked from below? The reason why this situation is terrifying for some is because of how vulnerable we feel in the bathroom. Like, the very last thing I would expect when I'm doing my duty is for any sort of confrontation, and even more so with a snake. Back in the past, toilets were typically outdoor, which caused them to be riddled by ants, spiders, centipedes, and all other stinging creatures. If you have a bathroom inside, don't count yourself lucky, because in Australia, 2 different several-foot long pythons were found in home toilets, and in one case, a man's reproductive organs were even bitten. Right in the hump of our list, we have a corpse in the water tank. In popular TV show How to Get Away with Murder and horror movie Dark Water, they both showed a specific scenario where someone would move into a new apartment and their tap water is discolored and tastes funny. In the end, they will discover the reason being is a deceased body. Except this situation really happened. In 2013, after residents of an LA hotel started to complain about their tap water, they soon discovered the body of 21-year-old Elisa Lam. Her passing remains an unsolved mystery to this day, but strange surveillance footage showed her acting odd inside of an elevator. She would be looking out as if someone was just following her and just tracking her down. After an investigation and a documentary, it was discovered that she did it intentionally, which makes this case even more sad.
Now at number 4, Bunny Man. Bunny Man is a guy from Virginia who dresses up as a rabbit and slaughters people with an axe. There's even an entire bridge named after him. Some say Bunny Man is an escaped convict who goes around Virginia mutilating rabbits and hanging them on Bunny Man Bridge. And the bodies of rabbits are said to show up around Halloween. This story likely came from the very real presence of a roaming madman in the area. In October 1970, a couple reported seeing a man dressed in a white suit and wearing bunny ears who began yelling at them that they were on private property. To make his point crystal clear, he threw a hatchet at their window, shattering it. There was a second sighting of Bunny Man 2 weeks later, when a security guard spotted a hatchet-wielding man chipping away at a porch railing. Police tried to get him, but they were unsuccessful finding the man.
All the way at our number 3 spot, we have a person under our bed. As I was a kid, I always was so scared of looking underneath my bed. I just always felt that something was just there. I could almost feel it.
Did you sleep with the nightlight on?
What?
Did you sleep with a nightlight on?
What? No, I'm a man. What?
Okay. Did you know many kids feel this way? Because movies and shows always depict ghosts and monsters coming from under our bed. It just seemed like something was always hiding itself down there. And it finally came true on July 10th, 2003. A man checked into Capri Motel just east of downtown Kansas City and began complaining about a foul odor in his room. Management said they couldn't do anything, so he spent 3 days in the room until he had enough. He finally decided to check out due to the horrid smell, and upon discovering, staff of the hotel discovered a man's body underneath the mattress in an advanced stage of decomposition. Now at number 2, candy razor blades. So you all remember when you were kids and went trick-or-treating and your parents had to check your candy for razor blades, but we all just thought that they wanted to take some of it. Well, the story of razor blades being in Halloween candy is true. In Ohio, one Halloween night, a child was sorting through their Halloween candy when they cut their finger from a blade in the candy bag. They went to the hospital for stitches and no one else was injured. The blade was hidden inside the wrapper of the candy bar. That same night in Waterbury, Connecticut, police arrested a man after razor blades were found in the bottom of 2 trick-or-treaters' candy bags. And now coming in at number 1, swallowing spiders. Bugs are gross enough when we're awake, but the things they can do to us when we're asleep and defenseless is a whole different kind of disturbing. Thankfully, the widely spread fact that we're all regularly swallowing spiders in our sleep isn't true. But bugs can squirm their way into other places, like your brain. A woman ended up with an insect in her head, but it wasn't from anything she ate or did. The woman woke up to a tingling and crawling sensation in her nose and assumed she was just getting a cold. But then she started to feel like her eyes were burning. After multiple visits to 4 different doctors, they found out that a fully grown cockroach had taken up residence in the base of her skull near her brain between her eyes. Starting out this countdown at number 10, the Spacey family. Kevin Spacey was once highly respected in the film industry. However, everything changed when accusations came out about him having a very abusive behavior. Kevin's father was a self-proclaimed follower of the German man Adolf. The hatred for all races other than his own central to Kevin's dad's lifestyle. His father also led a secret life as an abuser, turning his hateful attention to Kevin's brother Randy. The allegations against Kevin were even made by Kevin's brother Randy himself. Randy said that Kevin developed a conniving personality to avoid conflict with his father, It said that this dark family secret could be the reason why Kevin turned out the way he did with his own very abusive behavior. However, that in no way excuses him for his horrible actions.
From the Oscar stage to a courtroom across the pond, today actor Kevin Spacey faced a judge amid accusations of sexual offenses. The 62-year-old entered a plea as the judge set a date for his trial to begin. Here's ABC's Ian Pannell.
Not guilty, said actor Kevin Spacey. There were no comments to the gathered press.
Now at number 9, the Aguilar family. Veronica Aguilar was 39 years old at the time, and she lived in Los Angeles, California with her family. However, what neighbors and Veronica's husband didn't know was that she had imprisoned her own son inside of a closet in her home. With her husband, who was the child's stepfather, working away from home, Veronica was able to convince everyone that her son was being looked after in an institute. People, however, did not question it whatsoever because her son had autism, so it wasn't a big shock to them. After he was being kept in the closet for 3 years, being sedated most of the time, and starved by his own mother, the child unfortunately passed away. When the boy's stepfather realized what was really going on, Veronica was finally arrested and her family was unbelievably shocked by the situation. Here at number 8, the Odin family. Alice and Gerald Odin were a seemingly happy married couple with kids. When the couple was in their 70s, they were said to be described by neighbors as being quiet and polite. However, no one expected the things that they were hiding. Alice was in fact previously married, and her husband had mysteriously disappeared in 1974. Gerald had also been previously married as well. However, his wife and their 2 kids disappeared in 1980. When Alice and Gerald met for the first time, they realized they had a lot more in common than they thought they did. Alice had in fact shot her husband and buried his body in an abandoned gold mine. Gerald had also committed a crime, but his were much worse. He had taken the life of his wife and their 2 kids and hid their bodies in oil drums at the bottom of a lake. Their crimes were finally discovered in 2014 and they were both sentenced to prison. Number 7, the Brandt family. The story starts off with Michelle Jones, who lived in Orlando, Florida, who invited her uncle Charlie to stay over for the night in 2004. Charlie then arrived at her home with his wife Terry. Charlie then used a knife to take the life of his wife Terry, removed Michelle's head, and then hung himself. No one could figure out why a man with no history of any violence would commit such horrendous acts. That was, however, until people discovered what he had been hiding. Charlie had taken the life of his pregnant mother when he was just 13 years old, and that secret had been kept from everyone else in the family, including Michelle and Terry. Perhaps if they had known, they wouldn't have let him into their lives. Number 6, the Harrelson family. Woody Harrelson grew up in the 1960s with no allowed contact with his birth father. He'd always wondered why, but that was until he overheard a radio broadcast and finally realized the reason. The broadcast talked about a man with the same name as him who was a killer. His birth father, Charles Harrelson, was found guilty of murder. More specifically, he was found guilty for the assassination of a United States judge in the 20th century. It turned out that Charles was a hitman and was hired several times to take the lives of other people. It said that Charles was also present during the assassination of JFK, and he had told someone that he was in fact involved in some way. Halfway at number 5, the Staude family. Diane Staude had a horrible life from the year 2012 and onwards. It started in the year of 2012 when her husband tragically passed away very suddenly. Just 5 months after the horrible devastation, her autistic son began having seizures and then later also passed away. After that incident, her daughter Sarah was hospitalized with flu-like sickness and then developed brain damage. Now, it's said that bad luck comes in threes, but this wasn't just any bad luck. The Staude family carried a terrifying secret. It was found out that Diane had been poisoning her family with antifreeze. Not only that, but she was helped by her other daughter, Rachel. Diane, however, said that her actions were justified because her husband was violent, her autistic son was too time-consuming, and that her daughter Sarah was a financial burden. Rachel also revealed that she helped her mother commit these crimes so that she would have her mother's attention all to herself. Number 4, the Phillips family. In 1979, Mackenzie Phillips, who was just 19 at the time, was just about to get married. However, the night before her wedding, Mackenzie's father had shown up with the intention of stopping the wedding and making sure it never took place. Mackenzie and her father, in fact, did often use very heavy illegal paraphernalia, and while they had discussed Mackenzie's upcoming marriage, they decided to take heroin. Mackenzie claims that her father committed intimate crimes with her and that it took place for many years. Her father, John Phillips, was at the time a very famous musician, so Mackenzie's horrible experiences only came to light after her father passed away and she felt comfortable enough. Now at number 3, the Howell family. After an unsuccessful marriage in the 1980s, a dentist named Colin Howell remarried. His new wife's name was Kylie, and it was said that they had a very happy and fun life together. Colin became a big member of his community and went on to have children with his at the time wife Kylie. However, the two had both kept a dark secret. Colin confessed to her that he had taken the life of his previous wife. At the time, he was in an affair, and so he and his mistress decided to take the lives of both their partners and try and make it look like an accident. While Colin said he wanted to turn himself over to the police because he felt guilty, Kylie reassured him that she would keep his secret safe and said that he can't go to prison because he needed to be there for their kids. 10 years later, the guilt began to overwhelm Colin, and he finally confessed about what he did to the police. He then received 21 years in prison for the act he committed. Here at number 2, the Tetzlaff family. Victoria Tetzlaff grew up full-heartedly believing that her father was a hero. She believed that he dedicated himself to protect their country from enemies. However, Lieutenant Colonel Hernan Tetzlaff had a very deep, disturbing secret that he tried so hard to keep from his daughter. Hernan Tetzlaff was responsible for the kidnapping of hundreds of babies who were taken from their loving families during the Argentinian dictatorship of 1976. The children were said to be stolen from those who disagreed with the dictatorship and even given to other families. The parents of those children were often tortured and executed, and Hernan Tetzlaff was responsible for all of it. But adding to this horrible story was the fact that his daughter Victoria was a victim as well. He had kidnapped her from her original family, took the lives of her birth parents, and proceeded to raise her as his own. Now coming in at number 1, the Phoenix family. The actor Joaquin Phoenix had many successful movies. However, it's said that that's not the exact reason why he's famous. The family is most known for the tragic passing of Joaquin's brother River. However, the family went through an already tortured life before he passed.
Seizures on Sunset and Larrabee, please come here. Okay, calm down a little bit, okay? What's the address where you need us? It's Sunset and Larrabee. It's at the Viper Room. Okay, what's the address, sir? Do you know? What's the address to the fucking club? Okay, sir? Sir, calm down a little bit, okay? I'm sorry, it's my brother. Please come here. How old is he? He's 23.
Joaquin and River's parents were involved in a creepy cult known as the Children of God during the 1970s. This cult, who currently goes by the name of the Family International, had a very apocalyptic type of view on the world, and also a very eerie take on the God is love mantra. The cult used sensual, intimate moments to convert people while praising that the world was going to end, and they viewed people not involved as malevolent agents. Thankfully, however, their parents managed to escape the cult and change their family's last name to Phoenix, which they said they chose to symbolize their rebirth into a free society.
Coming at number 10, we have The Haunting of Hill House. The Haunting of Hill House is quite possibly the scariest TV show of all time. You heard it here first. The show follows 5 adult siblings whose paranormal experiences at Hill House continue to haunt their daily lives, which make them come together to solve it. I know the description doesn't sound too spooky, but give it a try. Well, apparently the show is inspired by a woman named Sarah Winchester, and her home was named the Winchester Mystery House.
Sarah was next in line to receive the fortunate build on firearms. This eventually led her to being tormented by guilt because she believed that her family and its fortune was haunted by the lives of the people in her firearms took. Then, when her husband passed, she would ask carpenters to build odd things like staircases leading to the ceilings, windows overlooking other rooms, and doors leading to absolutely nowhere. Coming in at number 9, we had the stranger in the backseat. It was a dark and foggy night. Denise was having trouble staying awake and noticed that there'd been a truck following her and flashing their high beams at her. Her anxiety levels were not helped by the fact that she was running low on gas and didn't know where the next town was. Finally, just as she thought she'd have to pull over and sleep till the morning on the side of the road, a tiny gas station appeared. Very run down, but a gas station nonetheless. She pulled in. The attendant made his way around the car and seemed to be very distracted, and she asked him to fill it up, and he even seemed to be making faces at her. He finally agreed to get the gas, but then asked her to pop the hood of the car because it smelled like trouble. Her anxiety from being on the road was starting to flare up again. She was all alone in a creepy gas station out in the middle of nowhere, and the weird attendant was finding reasons to keep her there. He asked her to come look at the engine and that he had to show her something. Not knowing what else to do, almost as if in a daze, she did as he asked. She didn't see a problem and handed him her credit card to pay for the gas. He then returned moments later and said that the credit card company was on the phone. As she went into the station to talk on the phone, he grabbed her arm and said, "I'm sorry, but there's a man crouched down in your back seat of the car and I didn't want him to know that I'd seen him." They called the police, who came to arrest a serial killer who'd stowed away in the car and was waiting for the perfect opportunity to get her.
Coming in at our number 8 spot, we have The Dead Ringers. David Cronenberg is known for his grotesque visuals and characters when he created the movie Dead Ringers. He knew he needed to direct something that wasn't far from reality, so he picked a true horrific story. The movie was directly inspired by the book of Barry Wood and Jack Giesland titled Twins, which is actually based on a true story. The movie follows the twins named Stuart and Cyril Marcus. They lived together in New York during the 1970s and were both gynecologists and experts in the medical field, so you know they were smart and pretty wealthy. Then in 1975, a person walked into their apartment and found that both men had passed away. The cause of death to this day is unknown and often debated, since most believe it to be a substance overdose while others think it was done for the devil. The apartment was completely trashed, with food and feces among other things scattered all around the apartment.
At our number 7 spot, we have A Real Nightmare. Now, I know we all know the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street is considered a classic American horror movie, one that gets featured during many people's horror movie marathons. It follows Freddy Krueger, the striped sweater-wearing homicidal ghost who haunts your nightmares. While most of Elm Street's stories is fictionalized, the inspiration for the idea of Freddy Krueger comes from a real-life story with real people. The director, Wes Craven, says his idea for A Nightmare on Elm Street came after reading a story in the LA Times. Craven spoke about an article that he read about a family who had just left Cambodia in the 70s to escape the genocide of killing fields. They became refugees who ventured to the US looking for a better life, but found tragedy instead. Now things were fine, and then suddenly the young son was having very disturbing nightmares. He told his parents that he was afraid that if he slept, the thing chasing him would get him. So he tried to stay awake for days at a time. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought his crisis was over. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. Here was a youngster having a vision of a horror that everyone older was denying. That became the central line of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
At our number 6 spot, we have The Silence of the Lambs. The only horror movie to win the Best Picture Oscar, Silence of the Lambs made Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter a chilling household name, while putting Thomas Harris bestseller and true crime cases that inspired it into the national spotlight. I know Hannibal was a different type of beast, but he was inspired by a real-life serial killer named Harry Hednick. He was probably the furthest from being good, as he was one of Philadelphia's most notorious criminals. He was infamous for his House of Terrors, where he would do unimaginable things to 6 different women that I can't even mention in this video. Even in the movie, Hannibal asked Starling, quote, "What does he do, this man you seek?" In which she replies, "He attacks women." They could easily be talking about Harry Hednick in the scene, especially since he inspired Buffalo Bill as well.
At our hump in the list, we have number 5, Scary Movie. Now, Scream is one of the most beloved horror franchises of all time. It's personally my favorite. But did you know that there's a disturbing true story that inspired it all? To be clear, there wasn't a real murderer stalking around in a ghost face mask, prank calling his victims and asking them about scary movies. But there were real scary stories of horrifying murders that inspired screenwriter Kevin Williamson to pen his game-changing script, originally titled Scary Movie. Now, one day before creating Scream, Kevin Williamson was watching a house for a friend when he started watching true crimes on TV about serial killers. He noticed that one of the windows in the house was open and that he got really freaked out. He picked up the phone and called a friend while he checked the whole house with a knife in his hand. Him and his friend began bantering back and forth about scary movies, which initially struck inspiration for his franchise series. In the movie, there's usually someone home alone when they receive a call from Ghostface, and they begin going back and forth with each other talking about scary movies. Moments before he attacks them, of course. I think the way that Kevin came up with the idea was simply brilliant. And you know, we love it.
Coming in at number 4, we have A Devil in Connecticut. The Devil in Connecticut is a book that is based on the controversial case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you're any bit of a horror fan, names Ed and Lorraine Warren should ring a bell, since they're one of the most famous paranormal investigators in history. You know, The Conjuring, Insidious, just to name a few of the films they inspired. The Devil in Connecticut follows the alleged possession of an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. The boy terrified everyone in the room, including his own parents, with the paranormal activity in which he was causing. Then Ed and Lorraine Warren would help the boy, and supposedly they managed to get the demon out of the boy, but instead the demon would enter a man named Arn Cheyenne Johnson, who then went on a homicidal spree in which claimed the life of his landlord. This case was named The Devil Made Me Do It, and this inspired many of the films we see today. Arnie was found guilty and sentenced to only 10 to 20 years in prison, but now he's out and much is unknown about his whereabouts.
Here at number 3, we have The Licked Hand. The story goes like this. A very young girl is home alone for the first time with only her dog for company. Listening to the news, she hears a killer's on the loose in her neighborhood. Terrified, she locks all the doors and windows, but she forgets about the basement window and it's left unlocked. She goes to bed, taking her dog to her room with her and letting it sleep under her bed. She wakes up in the middle of the night to hear a dripping sound coming from the bathroom. The dripping noise frightens her, but she's too scared to get out of bed to find out what it is. To reassure herself, she reaches a hand towards the floor for the dog and is rewarded by a reassuring lick on her hand. The next morning when she wakes up, she goes to the bathroom for a drink of water, only to find her dead, mutilated dog hanging from the shower with his blood slowly dripping onto the tiles. On the shower wall, written in the dog's blood, are the words, "Humans can lick too."
You might have heard this one, but at number 2 we have No Face Charlie. If you grew up in the 1950s and 60s in Western Pennsylvania, chances are you've heard the legend of the Green Man or No-Face Charlie. The legend says that No-Face Charlie would stalk the remote streets at night and sometimes chase others away from him. No disrespect, but if I saw this in the middle of the night, I would probably be running the other way as well. No-Face Charlie was actually based on a real man named Raymond Robinson. In 1919, Robinson was only 8 years old when he was reaching for a bird's nest at the top of an electrical pole when he was suddenly shocked with 11,000 volts of electricity. He was severely injured. His nose, lips, ears, and eyes were gone or completely misshapen, and on top of that, one of his hands were completely blown off. This is what gave him the image that appears haunting for others. But in fact, Raymond was a real kind and friendly individual, but others feared him and would give him this negative stigma regardless of how he really is on the inside. He has now since passed, and I hope he's finally accepted. At a number 1 spot, we have Candyman. This is a cautionary tale for kids not to dig right into their Halloween candy, and he is the sole reason why we have to take extra precaution on that day. The legend differs depending on who you ask. In one legend, it says that if you say his name 5 times, he will appear right behind you and take your life with his hook. In another legend, he poisons and puts other hazardous items inside of children's candy. But the truth is, this urban legend is revealed in many different stories, so the narrative changes.
They say that many years ago, Candyman was a black slave named Daniel. He was talented at painting and decided to paint a picture for the plantation owner's daughter, in whom he madly fell in love with. When the owner found out, he brought his racist friends to hunt him down. They would eventually get him and cut off his hand and replace it with a hook, which explains the hook for hand. In other iterations, Candyman was named Ronald Clark O'Brien. This man was convicted of killing his 8-year-old son with potassium cyanide laced pixie sticks, all because he wanted insurance money. On his execution day, people chanted, quote, "trick or treat" outside of the room that he died in.